If I told you each and every one of us has the potential to move like a world-class athlete, you'd probably laugh at me. But consider this. As kids, we all had dreams of becoming the next superstar. Yet somehow, along life's journey, we began to think that such abilities are reserved for only an elite chosen few, leaving the rest of us as mere spectators to their greatness. You can forget that. Elite movement is not confined to a rare genetic code. We're all capable of it. The best athletes in the world move so well because they have tremendous stability, coordination, balance, and mobility across multiple planes of motion. I found that these qualities can be harnessed, cultivated, and trained no matter who you are. Today, I'll share some of my favorite exercises across 5 fundamental movement categories, offering straightforward progressions from easy to more challenging, so that you can begin developing your body to move like a world-class athlete.
The first pattern you need to train if you want to have world-class athletic abilities is the march. Now we're going to start with the easiest version, which is the double arm farmer carry, load spread evenly amongst both hands. Now the reason we're doing this is because you need to develop floor to core stability. As an athlete, you're not always having 2 feet evenly planted on the ground. You're running, you're planting, you're cutting. You need to have stability with 1 foot planted to maintain pelvic and torso positioning. And if you have a falter in that, it will decrease your ability to create power and change of direction. Now, this is the easiest version. What we're going to do to take the next step up is to remove one of these weights. Now, when you have weight unevenly loaded on one side of your body, you have to work extra hard to minimize this side bending motion that's trying to occur. So your core is under a much greater challenge when you have the weight unevenly loaded like this. How do we progress this even further? The hardest version is an upside down kettlebell. Now, obviously you can do this with a dumbbell, but it will only be very difficult if you use a kettlebell because of the nature of the center of the bell being offset from your grip. Now, in order to make sure that this kettlebell does not fall over, your entire body from your core into your shoulder complex into the grip has to be connected as one. And as an athlete, how you use your entire body matters for force production and performance. So this is the most difficult version of a march. The second pattern you need to train is the lunge pattern. Now we can do this 3 different ways. The first is working in the posterior direction. This is what it's going to look like. You're going to plant your front foot, take 1 step back, control the descent, and back up. Now, being very careful to still have 50-50% body weight on each leg. Make sure that you're not staying too much in the front foot or leaning too far back. You want to be very balanced. Here's one way that I check for your balance. If you go into your rear foot split, pause, I should be able to come up and push you over. If you're completely balanced and stabilized through your core, from core or floor to core, you will not bend over or tip over side to side. Now, let's come back up. That's the first direction. Athletes don't just do movements in 1 plane of motion. We're in 3 planes of motion constantly. So here's your next way is you're going to do a lateral lunge. So you're going to take your plant leg and then take your other leg, step out. Now, a very important part is that when you do this lateral lunge, look at his alignment here. His knee is in line with his hip and he has a very stable foot. A lot of people, when they do a lateral lunge, they let this knee collapse. This is not a very strong and stable position. So you want this foot to be in a very strong position, gripping the floor, knee out to the side. Now his lateral hip is in a very strong position so that he's absorbing force going down and then he can push off back to this position. So this is teaching you how to absorb force in this lateral plane of motion and push off. A lot of lateral agility happens in many sports, but yet we don't train your ability to absorb and push off in that plane of motion under load. So that's where this is going to strengthen that capacity much greater than your simple lateral band walk, which is how most people train this range. The third lunge variation you can do is going to be a forward lunge with a clean. So we're creating a little bit more power development when we're doing a clean like this. This is what it's going to look like. Notice how he's going to take that lunge forward. He's going to plant his foot in a very stable position, knees in a great position in its alignment, and he's going to do that quick clean up to the rack position. Very stable with his core. Again, if you are with your buddy and you want to check, are they stable when they land? You should be able to come up and he cannot move at all. That shows how stable he is in that plane of motion. So this is the lunge pattern going forward. The third pattern you need to train is the squat. Now, most athletes are already training a goblet squat, front squats, and back squats, the traditional squat pattern. However, as we've talked about before with the other planes of movement, an athlete is not always on the field of play or on the court in this stance. So we need to be able to strengthen the squat movement in other ways. For example, let's get a little bit more single leg. We're going to do a kickstand squat. 90% of your body weight through your front leg. Your back leg is only there as a kickstand to help you with balance. Then squat down through the front foot as deep as you can and come back up. So if you think about it, as an athlete, you're constantly moving from one foot to the next. So let's strengthen your ability and capacity to squat on one leg, but that doesn't always mean I need you to be able to pistol squat. That's very difficult as far as mobility and stability goes for a lot of people, and with certain body proportions, a pistol squat just doesn't make sense. But a kickstand squat is something every single person can do. So this is one of the best ways to strengthen and build strong and healthy knees and ankles in the squat pattern, alongside your double leg squats that you're already doing in your training. Now, what's one more thing that we can do with the squat motion that you're probably not already doing is squatting on your toes. Now, most people think about their traditional squat, the heels are down, the full foot is balanced, which is awesome if you're a powerlifter, weightlifter, or for just building pure strength. But on the field of play, on the court, you're never completely grounded like that. We need to be able to have strength up on our toes. So that's where the toe squat comes in. So this is a little bit more of an unconventional squat, but still the squat pattern. So being able to get up on your toes and build strength and capacity, this is extremely challenging on your feet and on your ankles. So if you're someone that maybe has poor ankles, you're rolling your ankles all the time, you have a history of foot issues, learning how to build capacity to squat up on your toes and building your strength in that, this is something he's done with over 300 pounds on his back. This is something that is maybe a little unconventional, but can give you an edge in your athletic abilities like nothing else. Athletes need to be able to rotate, but that does not mean you should train Russian twists. You need to be able to create and maintain functional full body rotational capabilities. So this is what we should do instead. Let's stand on up. What we're going to do is a chop from a split position. So check this out. He's going to get into a split stance. Now we're going to develop the rotational capacity at his hips and his thoracic spine, keep his core braced to control rotation, and go through this pattern like a chop, down and back up. Here's what's gonna look like. Now, primarily, the lumbar spine is being held in place because the more stability we create at the lumbar spine, the more power rotational wise that we can create at the hips and transfer it through the upper body. So we're not thinking about rotating a lot at the low back, but rather keeping your core braced and moving about your hips and upper back. This is an athletic movement in rotation that will actually have way more carryover than any type of seated Russian twist you could ever do. The last pattern that you need to master to move like an athlete is the hinge. Now, a lot of people are already doing deadlifts and RDLs, where you're primarily moving about your hips, keeping your core tight, loading your posterior chain, glutes, and hamstring. However, what are ways that we can move like an athlete on one foot as well and still do this motion? One thing I want you to try is a kickstand RDL. So what you're going to do is have 1 foot forward, kickstand 1 foot back. So again, we're just up on the toes. Most of our body weight is in the front leg. From here, you're gonna perform the exact same hinge motion, but you're sinking into your stance like hip. So right here at this bottom position, he's feeling his left glute and his left hamstring. All of his weight is here. Here's something else that you can do to make sure, again, because an athlete is someone that has good floor to core linkage. So we're having the big toe down. As he starts, I want him to sort of screw his foot into the ground and open that hip. So he's feeling that external rotation torque that's very important to maintain proper alignment and stability through that front leg. But this is an excellent exercise that should also be performed other than your regular deadlift and RDLs for building hinge capacity.
How can we maybe make this a little bit more athletic? We need to develop speed and power within that range of motion, within that plane of motion. So what we can do is we can be in the same position and do a swing. A lot of people traditionally would do their kettlebell swings in the same exact hinge pattern, but let's do our swing also like this. Again, you need to be able to master the kickstand RDL first so that you know how to hinge into that posterior chain. But once you've done that, let's load it, let's make it faster, let's develop some power out of the hips. This is an excellent
way to do that. And also by going much faster, now you get a little bit of anti-rotation stability because your body's gonna wanna twist. Fight that and don't let it happen. Keep your core straight up and down and trunk pointed forward. Something like this is an excellent way to develop that power into the hinge pattern. This is how athletes move. So now that you know how to move like a world-class athlete, you need to make sure you're doing your core accessory work like an athlete as well, and not like a bodybuilder. So for that, make sure to check out this video for how to functionally train your core for stability.